You've just been born into this world, a tiny bundle of life swaddled in rough wool. The scent of damp earth, the dry rustle of straw, and the ever-present, biting perfume of wood smoke are the first things you truly know. Your life won't be etched in the grand tapestries of royalty or the clanging steel of knightly battles, but woven into the honest, relentless rhythm of the seasons. And of all the seasons, winter? Well, winter is the great test. In the small, unassuming village nestled amidst rolling hills, where the earth was both provider and demanding master, life for your family, and for every peasant household, was about to shift dramatically. The world, once vibrant with harvest's bounty, seemed to hold its breath, preparing for the inevitable. Winter, here, wasn't just a season. It was the ultimate test, a brutal gauntlet of survival that claimed the weak and forged the strong. Your small existence, a tiny infant, was a microcosm of this stark reality. The autumn days leading up to the great cold were a frantic, back-breaking sprint. Every single grain of wheat, every gnarled root vegetable, every precious scrap of preserved meat was a vital lifeline for the months to come. It was a race against the calendar, a feverish effort to stockpile enough to simply endure. You, a tiny infant, too young to comprehend the words, felt the urgency in your mother Alara's quick, efficient movements, saw the focused intensity in your father Thomas's tired eyes. This annual autumn scramble was not a choice. It was the first, most fundamental law of your existence. Your mother, Alara, her hands permanently etched with the marks of toil and calloused from countless seasons of labor, meticulously gathered the final bounty from the fields. Her back would ache from sunup to sundown, but her movements were precise, purposeful. Every stalk of wheat, every head of rye, every precious potato pulled from the grudging soil was a treasure, handled with a reverence born of necessity. The grain wouldn't just be eaten immediately. It would be carefully threshed to separate the kernel from the chaff, then winnowed in the autumn wind to clean it, before being stored in dry, cool granaries, protected from moisture and the ever-present gnawing of rodents. Root vegetables, the earthy carrots, the sturdy turnips, the humble parsnips were buried deep in underground pits or packed tightly in layers of sand within stone cellars, kept cold and dark to extend their freshness for as long as humanly possible. And the meat, after the autumn slaughter, a grim but necessary ritual where the village livestock was culled for the winter, every bit of pork or fowl would be meticulously cured. Some cuts would be salted heavily, others smoked over slow-burning fires for days, or simply dried until they were hard as rock. Your family understood that come winter, fresh meat would be a mythical luxury, a distant memory from warmer days. The pungent, smoky scent of curing meats would hang in the air for weeks, a constant reminder of the hard work being put in. But sustenance alone wasn't enough. Warmth was life itself. Your father, Thomas, a man of broad shoulders and quiet strength, along with the other men of the village, would venture deep into the ancient forest that bordered your lands. Their purpose wasn't sport or adventure, but the relentless, exhausting labor of felling trees and gathering every usable fallen branch and deadwood. The rhythmic thud of axes against ancient trunks, the splintering crack of falling timber, and the grunt of men hauling heavy logs across the leaf-strewn ground were the constant soundtracks of late autumn. Each heavy log dragged back to the village was a promise of heat, a physical shield against the bone-chilling cold that would soon descend upon your village. Piles of firewood grew steadily outside each humble cottage, small, precarious fortresses against the encroaching frost, a silent testament to the collective effort. And when the precious wood supply inevitably dwindled, even dried animal dung, mixed with straw and pressed into cakes, would be used as a less desirable but vital fuel source. You might see your older siblings, young Thomas with his determined frown, his small hands struggling with bundles of twigs, and Lyra, surprisingly strong for her age, helping their parents, learning early on that survival demanded every single member's contribution. Your home, a simple one-room cottage shared perhaps even with a few smaller animals, had to be more than just shelter. It had to be an impenetrable bastion against the elements. Your mother, Alara, would meticulously inspect the thatched roof, patching any gaps or thinning spots with fresh bundles of straw, her fingers nimble despite their roughness. The walls, constructed from wattle and daub, a sturdy mixture of woven branches, wet clay, and straw would be carefully replastered and sealed against drafts, an endless battle against the persistent chill. There were no fragile glass windows, only small, square openings covered with stretched animal hide or thick, coarse cloth. These would be pulled shut at the first sign of a biting wind, plunging the interior into a perpetual twilight, illuminated only by the hearth. It wasn't a grand dwelling, certainly, but it was your refuge, your only sanctuary, a tiny, drafty fortress that you and your family would inhabit for months on end, a desperate, shared closeness born of necessity. When the first heavy snowfall finally blanketed the fields, transforming the familiar landscape into a stark, silent canvas of white, the world outside your small dwelling effectively ceased to exist. Your lives, once dictated by the rhythms of the sun and the sprawling fields, now revolved entirely around the hearth. The fire wasn't just a convenience. It was the raw, beating heart of your home, and indeed, of almost every home in the village. It was rarely, if ever, allowed to go out. From the moment you stirred in the pre-dawn gloom, the lingering embers from the night before would be carefully coaxed back to life, filling the air with a pungent, smoky scent that, despite its occasional irritation, smelled like the very essence of safety and survival. This single, omnipresent fire served every conceivable purpose. It warmed your bodies, cooked your meager meals over its dancing flames, boiled precious water for what little hygiene was possible, and provided the only flickering light to break the deep, oppressive darkness that swallowed the world beyond its reach. Food during these monotonous months was a constant, yet utterly vital affair. Your diet consisted mainly of thick, dark bread, baked from coarse rye or oat flour, heavy and dense but remarkably filling. Gruel, a simple porridge made from whatever grains were most plentiful, often mixed with dried peas or beans, was a constant presence, warm and sustaining. Any meat or fish meticulously preserved from the autumn was rationed carefully, each morsel a precious calorie, a testament to forethought and frugality. Ale, a weak, homemade beer, was a common beverage, providing not just a mild, intoxicating effect that dulled the edges of hardship, but also much-needed calories and hydration in a time when fresh, clean water could be scarce and even dangerous. Every meal was a quiet affair, eaten quickly, often with the gnawing anxiety of dwindling supplies. You learned early on to savor every single bite, understanding its profound value in a world where scarcity was the norm. To conserve precious warmth, your entire family would often sleep together on straw mattresses laid directly on the earthen floor, pushed close to the fire. Piled high with thick wool blankets and rough animal hides, you'd all huddle together, sharing body heat, creating a small island of warmth against the surrounding chill. Even the chickens, with their soft clucking, and sometimes a small pig or lamb, might be brought inside the cottage during the coldest nights. Their animal warmth, though accompanied by their own scents and noises, was a welcome addition to the confined space, a living blanket in the frigid air. It was a stark reality, but one that, paradoxically, fostered an undeniable sense of closeness and interdependence. The long, dark nights of winter were not for idleness. With the fields lying fallow and frozen, your family's labor simply shifted indoors, taking on a new, quieter rhythm. Every waking hour was a productive hour, a testament to their enduring spirit, spent on tasks that kept clothes on your back, tools in working order, and bellies from complete emptiness. By the dim, flickering glow of a sputtering oil lamp or a precious, carefully rationed tallow candle, for light was a luxury. Each drop of oil or wax meticulously conserved. Your mother, Elara, would spend countless hours spinning wool into thread, her hands a blur in the dimness, mending worn garments until they were a patchwork of famine. History, or weaving rough linen on a small handloom. Your father, Thomas, would meticulously repair tools, his broad hands surprisingly deft as he sharpened a blunted axe, carved wooden utensils, or mended leather harnesses, preparing for the spring that would surely come. And even you, the youngest, along with young Thomas and Lyra, would have small, important duties. Perhaps it was sorting dried herbs for medicines, preparing flax fibers for spinning, or learning to tie simple knots, understanding early that every small contribution mattered. Every skill learned, every item mended, contributed directly to the family's continued, fragile survival. But the nights weren't all work. When the last chore was done, and the wind howled a mournful dirge outside, rattling the very timbers of your humble home, the real magic happened. Gathered tightly around the comforting warmth of the fire, its flames dancing and flickering, these were the sacred hours for storytelling. Your grandmother, her voice raspy with age but rich with memory, might recount ancient legends of brave knights and mythical beasts, tales that transported you far beyond the confines of your smoky hut. Or your father, his face softened by the firelight, might share familiar stories of harvests past, of droughts and floods, of cunning foxes outwitted and bountiful deer caught. These weren't just entertainment. They were living histories, moral lessons, and a vital thread connecting generations, teaching you about the world and your place within it. Sometimes, someone would bring out a simple flute or a lute, and the small cottage would fill with the melancholic, yet utterly comforting strains of a folk song, its notes chasing away the gnawing cold and the quiet dread that lingered in the shadows. You, nestled close, learned that even in the deepest darkness, stories and song could keep the spirit from being utterly consumed by the cold. Yet, beneath this veneer of cozy domesticity, a constant, chilling fear lingered, as tangible as the cold itself: disease. It was a specter that haunted every peasant home, an invisible enemy far more terrifying than any bandit or wild animal. Cramped living conditions, where bodies huddled close for warmth, limited hygiene, and diets often lacking essential nutrients, made everyone dangerously vulnerable. The common cold, dismissed in warmer times, could quickly escalate into a fatal lung infection, a cough that never quite went away. More terrifying still, outbreaks of measles, dysentery, or even the dreaded sweating sickness could sweep through a village with terrifying speed, claiming lives with relentless efficiency. And of course, the Black Death, though it largely came later in the era, would forever haunt the collective memory, a chilling reminder of humanity's utter vulnerability. With rudimentary medical knowledge, often relying on crude folk remedies from boiled herbs or the occasional, overwhelmed monastery healer, every persistent cough, every flushed face, every whispered prayer for the sick, was a grim reminder of how fragile life truly was. You witnessed neighbors fall ill, saw the despair in their families' eyes as loved ones weakened, and learned the chilling truth that some battles, no matter how fiercely fought, simply could not be won. The weight of loss, even from afar, settled upon your young shoulders, a quiet burden in the long winter nights. As the winter wore on, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift began to occur. The grip of the cold, though still firm, seemed to loosen its relentless squeeze. The sun, a pale, distant orb for so long, lingered a little longer each day, its rays holding a new, gentle promise. The snow, once crisp and unforgiving, began to soften, its hard edges receding, revealing the muddy, thawing earth beneath. You would hear the first timid chirps of birds, a fragile symphony replacing the winter's profound silence, a clear, sweet sign of hope returning. The air, though still cool, lost its biting edge, carrying the fresh scent of damp soil and awakening life rather than just wood smoke and dampness. Your father and the other men would begin cautiously venturing further into the fields, testing the ground with their heavy boots, their faces lifted to the sky, gauging the strength of the returning sun. They would start preparing the plows and tools that had lain dormant for months, their movements infused with a quiet, renewed purpose. Hope, a tiny, fragile seedling itself, began to stir in every heart, a silent prayer for the land to yield its bounty once more. The hard-won lessons of winter were etched deeply into the very fabric of your family's existence. Frugality, once a harsh necessity, became a second nature, every resource valued, every scrap utilized. The bonds forged in shared adversity, in the cramped confines of your hut and the chilling grip of illness, grew stronger, a silent understanding passing between neighbors and kin. You learned that true wealth wasn't in silver coins or grand titles, but in a full larder, a warm hearth, and the steady, quiet presence of loved ones who had braved the darkness by your side. These were the enduring legacies of the long, cold season. The quiet triumph of surviving another winter, a victory celebrated not with feasts, but with the simple promise of spring.